The anomaly surfaces not on a warship and not in a combat system. It surfaces in a human resources database at a mid-tier defense subcontractor in Huntsville, Alabama, at 9:17 a.m. on a Wednesday in November, when an onboarding compliance officer runs a routine employment verification check on 3 software engineers who joined the firm 14 months earlier through a staffing agency that specializes in placing foreign national technical talent on H-1B visa classifications. The compliance check is not a security investigation. It is a paperwork audit. The firm recently won a contract extension that requires updated I-9 documentation for all personnel with access to controlled technical environments. The 3 engineers have access to a controlled technical environment. Their paperwork is due. The compliance officer pulls the original employment verification files. The documents are present. The formatting is correct. The issuing agency references are consistent. The problem, invisible to any human reviewer operating without access to the classified identity resolution databases maintained by the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, is that 2 of the 3 engineers' identity documents resolve to individuals who do not exist in any sovereign registry that the issuing countries maintain for their own citizens. The names are real. The document numbers are structurally valid. The biometric photographs match the individuals sitting in the Huntsville office. The underlying identities were built, not born. The compliance officer does not know this. She notes that one of the 3 files has a missing secondary verification form, routes a request to the staffing agency for the corrected document, and moves on to the next item in her queue. The file sits in a pending status for 11 days before a DCSA contractor security officer, performing a random audit of the firm's controlled access roster, flags the same 3 engineers for expedited identity verification as part of a broader sweep of foreign national personnel on defense subcontracts. The expedited verification request goes into the DCSA system at 2:34 p.m. on a Thursday. It comes back flagged at 11:08 a.m. the following Monday with a single notation: identity resolution failure. Refer to CI. The counterintelligence referral reaches the FBI's Huntsville field office at 1:45 p.m. By 3 p.m., a special agent assigned to the Bureau's Foreign Influence Task Force has reviewed the referral and understood its significance with the particular clarity that comes from having spent 4 years building cases against state-sponsored technical infiltration operations. The 3 engineers are not just employed at a defense subcontractor. They are employed on a software quality assurance and integration testing contract that supports the Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division's Combat System Software Validation Program. Dahlgren is where the U.S. Navy validates, certifies, and approves every software update, patch, and configuration change that goes into Aegis combat systems fleet-wide before it is cleared for installation on operational warships. The 3 engineers have had routine access for 14 months to the pre-certification software environment, the staging architecture where new code is loaded, tested, and prepared for the validation pipeline that ends with an approved fleet installation package. They have not been reading the code. They have been modifying it. The forensic reconstruction of what they did takes a joint team from the FBI Cyber Division, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and the National Security Agency's Cybersecurity Directorate, 11 days of continuous work to fully map. What emerges from that work is a picture of technical operation that the lead NSA analyst, in a classified briefing that will not be summarized in any open-source document, describes as the most methodically executed software supply chain penetration she has reviewed in 14 years of working state-sponsored intrusion cases. The engineers targeted a single, specific component of the Aegis software update package scheduled for fleet-wide installation beginning in 6 weeks. The Cooperative Engagement Capability Data Fusion Module, known as CEC, which manages the real-time sharing of tracking and targeting data between all Aegis-equipped ships operating in a strike group. The CEC module is the neural network of a carrier strike group's collective air and missile defense. It allows a destroyer on the eastern edge of the formation to cue an SM-6 intercept based on targeting data provided by the cruiser on the western edge, creating a unified, distributed engagement picture that is more capable than any single ship operating independently. In a saturation attack scenario, where dozens of inbound threats must be engaged simultaneously across a wide geographic spread, the CEC is the architecture that prevents the group from wasting interceptors on the same target from multiple platforms while leaving other threats unengaged. It is in the operational assessment of every naval warfare analyst who has studied modern carrier strike group defense. The single most important software component in the collective defensive capability of a U.S. forward fleet formation. The engineers introduced a conditional logic error into the CEC module's track correlation algorithm, the function that deduplicates targeting data from multiple ships' radars and assigns each confirmed threat contact a single, authoritative track that all platforms can engage from. The error does not affect the module under normal operating conditions. It does not affect it during testing, because the test environment does not replicate the specific combination of simultaneous inbound track density and cross-platform data synchronization, latency, that only occurs during an actual high-volume engagement. The error activates when the module is processing more than 40 simultaneous inbound threat tracks with cross-platform synchronization intervals of less than 1.2 seconds, a condition that exists only when a strike group is under saturation attack. Under those conditions, the corrupted deduplication function begins assigning duplicate track identifiers to different threat contacts. Two different inbound missiles receive the same track number. The engagement management system reads them as the same target. One interceptor is allocated. One threat is engaged. The other proceeds unimpeded toward its target, while the system records a successful intercept of a contact it believes has already been neutralized. In a 40-missile saturation attack, the track corruption function would generate approximately 11 to 14 duplicate assignment errors. 11 to 14 inbound threats would pass through the engagement envelope unengaged, each one carrying a warhead toward a ship whose crew believes the defensive system has already handled it. The corrupted package has been in the validation pipeline for 9 weeks. It has passed 4 separate automated test cycles. It has passed 2 human code review checkpoints. It has been approved for final certification. It is scheduled to begin fleet-wide installation in 38 days, starting with the 3 destroyers currently undergoing pre-deployment workups at Naval Station Norfolk. Those destroyers are assigned to the strike group forming around the USS Harry S. Truman, scheduled to deploy to the Western Pacific in support of U.S. forward presence operations in the South China Sea region. Their deployment timeline places them in the operational theater within 90 days. The strike group they will join is the primary U.S. naval presence in the region during a period of elevated tension over Taiwan Strait transit rights that has been building for 7 months. The people who built this operation understood the deployment schedule. They built the corrupted module to be installed, deployed, and operational before the contingency that would trigger its activation. The activation trigger is a saturation attack. The saturation attack was being planned. On the same day that the FBI special agent reviews the identity resolution failure referral in Huntsville, a separate intelligence collection stream, a SIGINT feed monitoring encrypted communications associated with a People's Liberation Army Navy coordination network, captures a sequence of traffic consistent with operational planning coordination between planned submarine assets and shore-based anti-ship missile batteries in the South China Sea region. The traffic volume and pattern are not unusual in isolation. What is unusual is its correspondence to a series of satellite imagery updates showing repositioning of DF-21 D anti-ship ballistic missile launchers at 2 coastal defense sites in Fujian Province, and the unscheduled departure from Yulin Naval Base of 4 Type 093 attack submarines over a 72-hour window. The intelligence picture, assembled by analysts at Pacific Fleet's Intelligence Directorate, suggests pre-positioning of assets consistent with the early stages of a strike package assembly against a surface group transiting the first island chain. The two intelligence streams are in different databases, processed by different teams, and do not intersect in any automated system for 6 days. The intersection happens because a Navy lieutenant commander assigned to the Joint Intelligence Support Element at Pacific Fleet Headquarters is simultaneously reading an internal CI bulletin about the Huntsville investigation and a targeting analysis update about the planned pre-positioning activity. And she recognizes that the software installation timeline for the corrupted CEC module and the projected readiness timeline for the planned strike package against the Truman Group are not coincidental. They are synchronized. She documents the intersection at 7:44 p.m. on a Friday and routes it through the CI bulletin system with a priority flag that is one level below the threshold for automatic senior leadership notification. It is reviewed by a senior analyst at 8:15 p.m. who elevates it immediately. By 9:30 p.m., the assessment has reached flag rank on both coasts. By 11 p.m., the fleet-wide CEC module installation has been suspended by emergency directive. The 3 engineers in Huntsville are placed under physical surveillance. The staffing agency that placed them is frozen pending investigation. The next question is the one that determines everything. How much does the adversary know about the investigation's timeline? The answer, developed through the painstaking forensic reconstruction of the engineers' communication patterns over the preceding 14 months, is not enough. The engineers' exfiltration protocol, the mechanism by which they reported their operational status to their handlers, operated on a 30-day cycle. Their last status transmission was 22 days ago. Their next scheduled transmission is 8 days away. For 8 days, their handlers will have no indication that the operation has been compromised. For 8 days, the plan's operational planning will proceed on the assumption that the CEC module is on track for installation and that the deployment timeline is intact. The decision made at a secure conference at 12:47 a.m., attended by the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare, the Director of the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Commanding Officer of Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division, and 4 others, is deliberate and carries consequences that extend well beyond the immediate operational situation. A clean, corrected CEC module will be built from a validated pre-contamination baseline. It will be introduced into the installation pipeline under cover of the existing schedule, appearing to any external observer with access to the logistics documentation as the same package that was already approved. The installation will proceed on schedule to the 3 Norfolk destroyers. The engineers will not be arrested for 8 days. The corrected module takes 72 hours to rebuild and validate against the clean baseline, a process that requires the Dahlgren Division's software certification team to work in 3 continuous shifts under conditions of strict information compartmentalization. The people performing the rebuild cannot be told why they are rebuilding it, only that a critical validation error has been identified and the timeline for correction is non-negotiable. The work happens in the same building, on the same systems, using the same certification protocols as any other software validation cycle at Dahlgren. From the outside, and from the perspective of anyone monitoring the facility's administrative systems, it looks like a routine accelerated revalidation. Inside the team, it looks like the kind of pressure that produces mistakes when the people under it are not experienced enough to work through it. The team lead is experienced enough. She has rebuilt Aegis software components under pressure before, not under these exact conditions, not with this specific context, but the discipline of systematic validation does not change based on the stakes attached to it. You check the same things in the same order with the same rigor, regardless of who is waiting for the result. The team lead checks them. The validation returns nominal at 4:17 a.m. on the 3rd night. She submits the certification package. She goes home. She will not know for a very long time what she certified, or why it mattered the way it did. The corrected module begins installation on the first Norfolk destroyer at 8 a.m., 4 days ahead of the original schedule, under a logistics record that documents it as an accelerated deployment driven by operational requirements. The second destroyer receives it at 2:30 p.m., the third at 9:45 p.m. By the following morning, all 3 destroyers are running the clean module. The fleet-wide rollout is restructured to prioritize Western Pacific-assigned assets. On the 8th day after the investigation's escalation, 6 hours before the engineers' scheduled handler transmission window, NCIS, and FBI execute simultaneous apprehensions at 3 locations: the Huntsville office, a residence in Madison, Alabama, and a 3rd location in Tysons, Virginia, where a 4th individual, not one of the engineers, but the cutout through whom their handler communications were routed, has been under continuous surveillance since day 2 of the investigation. All 4 are taken without incident. The Tysons cutout has a laptop. The laptop has an encrypted partition. The partition, analyzed by NSA technical personnel over the following 17 hours, contains communications records that map a network of 8 additional technical infiltration placements across 4 defense subcontractors supporting 3 separate naval programs. The counterintelligence operation that begins from those records will run for the better part of 2 years. The plan's operational planning continues for another 19 days before signals intelligence indicates a stand-down of the DF-21D launcher repositioning and the return of 2 of the 4 Type 093 submarines to Yulin Naval Base. The assessed reason, developed through patient traffic analysis of Plan Navy coordination communications by a team of analysts at Pacific Fleet's Intelligence Directorate who have been monitoring this specific network for 11 months, is an internal plan intelligence assessment that the CEC module installation has been completed on a different schedule than their technical source had projected, and that the software state of the deployed group cannot be confirmed as matching the targeted configuration. The adversary's targeting model was built around a specific known vulnerability in a specific known software version on a specific known set of holes. That model no longer corresponds to a verifiable reality. The uncertainty is not resolved in their favor. The strike package requires a level of confidence in the engagement outcome that the uncertainty makes impossible to achieve. The stand-down is not a permanent withdrawal. The DF-21D launchers return to their garrison positions. The submarines reposition to patrol patterns consistent with training operations. The satellite imagery that had driven elevated concern in Pacific Fleet's Targeting Analysis Directorate returns to baseline. None of this means the threat has ended. It means it has been deferred while the adversary recalculates. The recalculation will take time. The network that provided the software access has been disrupted. The replacement of 4 technical assets with fabricated identities in the U.S. defense subcontractor ecosystem requires months of preparation that cannot be compressed. The window that was supposed to open with a validated, corrupted CEC module installed fleet-wide on Western Pacific-assigned strike group assets has closed. The adversary's planners understand that something has changed fundamentally in the access picture. They do not know what. They do not know when. They do not know how deeply the exposure extends into the network the Tysons cutout was managing. That uncertainty, manufactured through the discipline of holding the investigation silent for 8 days, allowing the installation to proceed on a scripted timeline that looked identical to the original schedule from any external vantage point, and ensuring the engineer's handler transmission window closed before the arrests executed, is the operational outcome that the 12:47 a.m. decision was designed to produce. The decision cost 8 days of silence, 3 continuous shifts of software engineering work, and the calculated risk of allowing 4 compromised individuals to remain at liberty long enough for the deception to complete. The return on that cost was a planned strike package deferred at the planning stage rather than defeated in the engagement envelope. The preferred outcome of counterintelligence is not the intercept. It is the operation that never launches. The classified after-action summary records the following: 14 months of access by the 3 engineers to the Dahlgren validation environment. 9 weeks the corrupted CEC module, spent in the certification pipeline before detection. 11 to 14 projected track duplication failures in a 40-missile saturation engagement, each representing an unengaged inbound threat against a ship whose crew would have had no indication the defensive net had failed. 72 hours to rebuild and validate the clean module. 8 days, the investigation remained silent to preserve the installation timeline deception. 4 individuals taken into custody. 8 additional placements identified from recovered communications. 0 fleet assets compromised. And 1 intersection, documented at 7:44 p.m. on a Friday night by a lieutenant commander who was reading 2 unrelated reports at the same time, that prevented a software vulnerability from being deployed into a combat theater before the strike package designed to exploit it was ready to execute. The most dangerous attack surface in a modern naval force is not the hull, and it is not the radar, and it is not the missile magazine. It is the 14-month window between when a foreign intelligence service places a technical asset inside the development pipeline and when that asset's work reaches the fleet. In that window, the weapon is not a missile or a drone or a hypersonic glide vehicle. It is a conditional logic error in a deduplication algorithm, sitting in a validated software package, waiting for the exact operational conditions that will make it invisible until it is too late. The fleet's defense begins in Huntsville. It begins in the identity verification queue. It begins in the HR database of a mid-tier subcontractor at 9:17 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, when a compliance officer pulls a file and notices that 1 secondary verification form is missing. She will never know what she started. The record knows. And in this business, the record is the only accountability that matters. Every line of code that protects a ship at sea was written by a human hand. The question is always whose.